The Mon Calamari and their capital ships are often described as the backbone of the Rebel Alliance, and I think for good reason. Home One and her sister ships were some of the only vessels the Alliance had available when they needed to lay a serious beating on Imperial Star Destroyers, or at least survive long enough to accomplish a key objective, like destroying the second Death Star at the Battle of Endor. Mon Calamari cruisers would also go on, as we'll discuss later on in the video, to form the backbone of the New Republic's navy for many decades. So why didn't the Empire ever make an attempt to subjugate the Mon Calamari and use their shipyards, especially given the fact that the Mon Calamari were supporters of the Republic and probably could have been nationalized during the Imperial transition? Well, the Essential Guide to Warfare actually covers this topic very nicely, and it explains, as I just did, that the Mon Calamari shipyards had been proudly pumping out starships for thousands of years, and that the Mon Calamari themselves were actually supporters of Palpatine. That may be somewhat surprising, given that the Providence and other CIS ships were of Quarren design, the Quarren being the other species native to the Mon Calamari homeworld. But as we see in Star Wars Legends, the Mon Calamari have a long history of supporting the Republic, even producing Republic dreadnoughts, and the Mon Calamari as a people also generally value law and order, security, and stability, despite their obvious rebellious tendencies, and that's one of the reasons why Admiral Akbar, for instance, never really liked the New Republic's tendency to work with smugglers like Talon Card. So Palpatine had a great opportunity to nationalize the Mon Calamari shipyards, and he had an excuse to do so. The Quarren had just stood against the Republic. With the Clone Wars over and people tired of war, I think he could have used rhetoric to justify making sure that the Mon Calamari wouldn't too stand up against the new Empire, basically saying, hey, the Quarren were rebellious during the Clone Wars, let's make sure that the Mon Calamari haven't been drinking the same Kool-Aid. This did somewhat happen, as the Essential Guide to Warfare explains. Moff Tarkin himself actually subjugated the Mon Calamari shipyards and hoped to, and I quote, retool them for Imperial use, but the Navy dismissed the Mon Cal technology as too alien. This would obviously end up being a grave mistake. It is true though, Mon Calamari warships are notably not very comfortable for other species to work on. This was especially true when the big Mon Calamari cruisers were largely civilian vessels repurposed for wartime, but by not really clamping down on these shipyards, as I've described in previous videos, this gave the Mon Calamari the chance to throw off the Imperial yoke, and eventually they did so, heavily weaponizing existing civilian ships, mining the hyperspace lanes into Mon Cala, and of course actively supporting the rebellion. And I think part of the issue is the Empire didn't quite know just how powerful the Mon Calamari could be as enemies, or as allies or subjugated servants. There is evidence that the Mon Calamari were developing warships during the Clone Wars and before, but it's unlikely that they were designing ships to their peak efficiency and deadliness, given the Ruusan reformations, which limited warship armament size, and the fact that it seems like when it came to Republic purchases, they were mostly just making standard issue ships like the Dreadnought. Maybe Tarkin and others didn't realize that the Mon Calamari were capable of refitting ships to the scale as they did with the Independence and the Home One, and of course later on that they could build even more powerful purpose-built warships. Of course, the Imperial Star Destroyer wasn't a bad ship, and the vessels used by the Empire were certainly less alien. The Imperial Star Destroyer, for example, was designed by humans at Kuat Drive Yard and was produced at shipyards across the galaxy, but especially at human planets like Corellia. This probably could have been the case at Mon Calamari as well, except for, again, what the book describes as alien technology. Probably not only alien design, but maybe their manufacturing methods were so different that producing Imperial Star Destroyers just wasn't reasonable. Had the Mon Calamari actually been given Star Destroyer work, I bet you we would have seen something like we did with the Black Fleet. For those who don't know, there was an Imperial fleet known as Black Sword Command, which was stationed in the Kunat cluster. The fleet was attached to a shipyard known as the Black 15 shipyard, which was serviced almost totally by the local Yavathans. The Yavathans staged an uprising. They took over many ships within the fleet, then went on to use the shipyards to produce their own thrust ships. Had the Mon Calamari been responsible for producing ISDs, I bet eventually they would have done the same thing, taking any Imperial Star Destroyers and other vessels available to them, probably some larger ships like Super Star Destroyers given the size of their shipyards, as was the case with the Black Fleet, then later reconverting their yards back to producing Mon Calamari vessels. Maybe that wouldn't have happened because the Empire would have kept a closer eye on them than they did with the Yavathans in the Kunat cluster, but who knows. Anyway, moving on. As I described, after the Mon Calamari removed the Imperial occupiers from their system, they went on to produce warships for the Rebel Alliance and were so deeply entrenched with their hyperlane's mind that the Empire simply chose not to dedicate the massive amount of resources that it would have taken to destroying the Mon Calamari shipyards, especially where Palpatine had an ace in his sleeve, the Death Star 2. The plan was, after defeating the rebels at Endor, Palpatine would take the Death Star to several planets, including Chandrila and Mon Calamari, then destroying them. Obviously, this wouldn't happen, and the Mon Calamari moved from being the backbone of the Rebel Alliance to now the backbone of the New Republic. The Essential Guide to Warfare gives this absolutely incredible stat, saying that in some years, as much as 5% of the entire government budget was assigned to Mon Cal-led shipbuilding efforts. That's not 5% of the entire military budget, 5% of the government's budget as a whole. As a comparison, in the real world, the United States spends about 10% of its budget on its military, so we're talking serious spending. Obviously, the New Republic has a different setup, with local systems and planets doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to taking care of its citizens, but the Mon Calamari undoubtedly were a vital part of the Alliance, and they would go on to move from the MC-80 type to the MC-80B, the MC-90, which eventually made the warships a little less alien and more comfortable for non-Mon Cals, then even more powerful ships like the Mediator, the Viscount, the Mon Calamari heavy carrier like the Blue Diver, and more. So the Mon Calamari, in short, have a fascinating history, and the Empire really messed up by dismissing their technology as simply too alien. If Palpatine could go back, I bet you he would have destroyed the Mon Calamari shipyards the first chance he'd gotten, maybe made it look like an accident, then boiled the seas of Mon Calamari, not unlike his successor Darth Krayt would do 100 years later. But guys, that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Pretty fun one. I love talking about the Mon Cals. Let me know if you've got any further questions or any topics you'd like to see me cover in one of these videos. Make sure you also check out my gaming channel, X2. We've been covering lots in terms of LEGO Star Wars over there. There's also the Clips channel, X Clips. You guys can find that if you want. Until next time, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.